Hey, how's it going, everyone out there at Global Hack Week September? My name is Rosendo. As you may know by now, I hope y'all are having a great time out there. Let me hear y'all get hyped in the chat. I already see a bunch of folks in there. I love this one, showing us a little love. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of folks that are always at Global Hack Week, a lot of new folks as well. So that's awesome. I see folks joining us from Twitch and from YouTube. How's it going, MC Sylvie? Hi to you as well. And yeah, like honestly, I'm just gonna get right into it. We've got a great guest ready for y'all today. His name is Ben Matthews, coming all the way from Atlanta, and joining us from Stack Overflow. So I'm pretty sure a bunch of y'all are already well aware of what Stack Overflow is. If not, you're gonna learn a lot about it today. But really, like I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's not about me. It's about you and learning new things from a person named Ben, Mr. Matthews. Yes, exactly. Definitely keep the energy, y'all. I really love to see it. Without any further ado, let me just go ahead and bring Ben onto the stream. How's it going, Ben? I'm going to leave you to it. All right.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, this chat does have a lot of energy, especially for this early. It's good to meet you all. And yes, please call me Ben, no Mr. Matthews. But thank you very much for coming and joining. And what I wanted to talk to you today was, kind of over my time working in technology. I've been in it for almost 20 years now, and I'm lucky enough to now work on one of the largest technology platforms there is. And I've worked with teams big and small and organizations of all sizes. I started out as a QA engineer, then moved on to a developer. And what I really wanted to share today with over all that time was, Racinda, if you wouldn't mind sharing the slides, is what I wish I knew my first day as a developer. Over all this time of being able to look back, when I was learning, there's a whole lot of things I just wish I knew that day one, and maybe even before my first day, even when I was still just learning on how to be a developer. So, but first, I want to tackle some background for those of you. I'm not sure how experienced some of the folks in here are, but just to get it out of the way for people, especially if you're very new, is that development is intimidating, especially if you're brand new to it. It's not something that jumps out as welcoming right away. Whether you're new to a certain language or you're new to development altogether, if you've never developed before, it can seem extremely obscure, these weird characters that are in a random format that it is different from anything you've seen before. And that can be pretty intimidating. So just to kind of acknowledge that and go forward, I want to show a little bit more modernized version of the first piece of code I ever saw in my very first programming class. Now, this relatively simple, and underscore relatively, is a piece of assembly code. Now, by the way, I do not recommend anyone's first language to be assembly. It's not exactly the most welcoming and happy language to meet first. But some people can probably guess what this program does just by kind of looking at one line there. Like this is your hello world, your very extremely basic assembly program. For those that don't know, hello world is your kind of intro program that you write for any new language, just so you can kind of get the ins and outs. Now, my computer science professor showed this to me to try to ease me in to programming, and this was supposed to make us feel comfortable. But honestly, the first time I saw this, I was ignoring what's highlighted. I was ignoring the hello world part. What the heck was all that? I have no idea what was going on there. It seemed like Klingon to me, of whatever that was supposed to be. Like, where do you begin? What does it even do? How do you even begin to understand all of these moving parts? And it seems extremely daunting to try to even, where do I even begin to tackle that? And that kind of leads me into the first thing I want to share that I wish I knew is, don't let weird things scare you off. Whether you're learning a new language, you're moving into a new industry, you're learning programming for the first time altogether, don't let weird things scare you off. And as you keep going into the industry, you're going to see things that feel like gibberish. They just don't make sense. But it's also just completely opposite of how you normally thought about things. This is entirely normal. In fact, I would say if you actually don't feel that way, something's wrong. Like, it's very healthy to feel like something is weird or uncomfortable. Because right when I was starting to get familiar with the whole assembly thing, it started to feel like this now. If you look at the comments, kind of outlining what each of these parts do, I was starting to able to just look at it and understand in my own, internal monologue what each of these lines were doing. So when I was able to get more practice and exposure, it didn't feel so weird anymore. In fact, I became comfortable with it, but I also became dependent on that mindset. Like, that this was normal to me. Anything else felt a little weird. And I was far too new to do anything fancy. This was my normal. But then, just like a semester later, I got my next programming language. What the heck just happened? This is completely different. Where are my message length controls? How am I moving values around now? And I mean, I think we can all say overall, this is a far more welcoming piece of code for someone seeing code for the very first time. But to me, that was still extremely weird. And I had to start the thing all over again. But it wasn't just that one shift. As my whole career went on, it happened over and over and over. And eventually I had to learn that this feeling was a learning experience. I had to embrace weird. Don't let weird things scare me off. And it's in a lot of different areas and a lot of different ways. And there's a natural feeling of resistance, but use that as a tool. It's a sign that you need to change your gears into learning. Don't let resistance come up, that this is your way, that you're going to see something new, and just add it to your tool belt. There's going to be many tools that you're going to add to your tool belt as time goes on and on and on. And you're going to find them in an industry like ours, whether you're looking for them or not, they're going to come your way. And every time you're going to get a little bit more perspective and discover things that fit for you. And I want to underline that there's going to be things that fit for you. And it's going to change from person to person. And regardless of what people will scream on Twitter or any dev community that you're in, lesson number 2, there are usually several right ways to do something. Now, just to level set this, for some very simple and direct tasks, you usually don't have too much wiggle room. But as you go on, you're going to see a lot of people do things in a lot of different ways with pros and cons. And you're going to find your own approach to these, which ways that you like to do it. And it's not usually right or wrong, but there's a give and take, pros and cons. And to do this, if I could get a little bit of audience participation here. So these are 2 pieces of code that both fit into a C# program. And so I want to ask you, which one is better? See if you can put number 1 or number 2 in the chat. I'm curious what they say. 2. I got 1 vote for number 2. Number 1, number 2. And option B will take. Yeah, and so there's different answers there. And as time goes on, you're going to learn that the real answer to this is it depends, right? Because as time goes on, let's say the one on the left runs 20% faster. But let's say the one on the right, as odd as it is, we're writing a function to add 2 numbers together, which any language can do without a function. But if you're new to development, the one on the right is far more welcoming. The one on the left may run faster, but you're going to hear this come up more and more and more and more of, it depends. And as you keep going up, you're going to get it more. Because, the left being faster and performing better, that's always nice. No one's going to say it isn't. But the one on the right is easier to read. And that's extremely nice too. So which is better? It depends. If you are using this function in your hot path, something that's called hundreds of thousands of times a minute or a second, and it's a bottleneck portion of your application, option one's going to win, the one on the left. That's what you need to do to make sure that your application is performant. But more than likely, it isn't. And eventually, and really focus on this, no matter how big or small something is, eventually it's going to have to be maintained. I don't care if it's 1 line, 2 lines, 1,000 lines, someone's going to have to maintain it. And sometimes, even maybe more often than not, it's not going to be maintained by you. So the readability and ability to understand it is extremely valuable, which brings me to tip number 3. Most of the complexity around development is working with other people. A lot of people have some mindset of development is going off into a corner, coding for 8 hours a day, pushing ones and zeros around, shifting bits, and then you go home. But that's really not the case anymore. And it used to be for a while, which is where the stigma came from, of like being in the matrix, shoved in a cubicle, looking at weird characters, and then you go home. And that actually wasn't too far off from about 10 or 15 years ago, where you just worked in this huge code base. And the most conversation you had with other people was who had which file checked out and who's working on what. And that was very quick, like 30-second conversations. And you rinsed and repeat until we actually learned that working together is actually better, sharing ideas and relying on each other. This is something that really came about just 10 or 15 years ago, is the new modern way that we develop. Because the thing is, no matter how we cut it, at the end of the day, whether before or even now, development is a creative exercise. This is not just a mathematical thing. We are solving problems with what we do. And there's a lot of questions around that. I mean, no matter what, at least a little bit, it's always a creativity aspect to what we do. Do we use big solutions, or is there something small? How do we architect things? Do we write something brand new, or is there something already out there that we can leverage? Are we approaching this problem completely wrong and we need to get rid of some preconceived notions and explore other alternatives? By the way, that one happens a whole lot. And because this is a creative exercise, bringing in ideas from other folks is important, or even negotiating ideas with other people is a big, big part of what you do. So I want to give an example of a couple conversations I have had over time. First one I've had with a designer. Now, this is a simplified version of real conversations I've had, where a designer came to me and said, we need to have a custom login screen for each user. And my response to a lot of these which I was kind of known for, and I said a lot, well, that's an interesting idea. And then I kind of go into try defining like what we're really talking about. And so I just asked, how would it help? And then we kind of got to what they were really trying to solve. They want to be more welcoming to folks in the site with a contextual experience. Okay, a custom login screen for everyone, something customized to them. But then we had to kind of negotiate. I'm like, okay, I got what you mean. But before they log in, we don't really know anything about them, or without being very creepy and, violating some privacy concerns. So we did this creative exercise of negotiating alternatives. What about if we just know the location from their IP, which is, some public information, could we do something contextual there? And then this is what she came back with, like, so we can show like the state flag or their local college football team on the login page. I said, sure, you got it. And then we came to a solution from that. And that was a creative exercise, not a technical one, which is a lot of what we end up doing. So another example here of something I had with our a product manager at one time, someone who's in charge of, setting priorities and what's the next thing we're going to build. So they come to me and say, let's prioritize this. Just to break it down, we'll say the new fancy feature we're talking about over fixing the login page. So I came back and said, that's an interesting idea. But the login page is a crucial function. Is it really less important to everything else that, any new feature we might build? And then we kind of got into where they were coming from. Like, we have a committed deadline for this fancy feature and we have to hit the numbers. And then we came back to this, interpersonal creative exercise and saying that without these fixes to the login page, we're open to a data breach. Now, that's a big value proposition difference. Can we explore on how to do both? We got into a negotiation of we can deprioritize less fancy feature and pick that up later. And we said, good, sounds good. Now, these are the conversations you have a lot as a developer, not even so much just sitting down and looking at code. It's what we work on, what order we work on it, how we work on it. These are very big parts of how we solve problems with technology. And these are exercises you're going to have to learn. And there's a lot of different there's a lot of different ways that you can tackle it, and a lot of different exercises you could do, and a lot of places to learn. Which is point 4 I want to get across, is that right now there are endless resources to use and learn. This is an extremely exciting time to be a developer, or even get into development for that matter. Like, and to date myself and to be an old curmudgeon, back in my day, we didn't have free tools, we didn't have free hosting. I had to learn from books, and I had to pay like these high prices for fees. And I'm very happy that we don't have that anymore. You have YouTube, GitHub, really free, or maybe just really cheap hosting, free dev tools, free libraries. This is fantastic that the community has evolved into sharing all these resources with each other. So I would really encourage you, with everything that we have out there, figure out what you love. Try one thing, then try the next one. With all the resources out there, you can see other people using it, watch videos, or just try it yourself with any tools out there. There's the Stack Overflow API. There's a whole lot of things that we can use, and there's endless free education sites, videos, articles. There are these tools and APIs that you can build and try to use. But most importantly, and something that I think people really need to lean on more, is that there's very exciting dev communities that are growing, and you can be a part of them to learn from other people, but also on how to mentor. And like, for instance, Stack Overflow, there's GitHub pages, a lot of places you could go, and a lot of great tools. But with that in mind, and all of these resources out there, I want to introduce you a week-long challenge that we hope you could be a part of. And that is, I'm challenging you all to use the Stack Overflow API to build something that would be interesting or educational for other technologists. Now, for those of you that don't know, Stack Overflow is committed to an open and transparent sharing of data. That's one of the core things that we focus on. And the Stack Overflow API being one of them. We have also done a database dump, I think roughly every quarter. We share our database with private information scrubbed out that anyone can use and build what they want. So you have access to all the questions, all the answers, all the comments, anything cool that we do on Stack Overflow, we share. So you can check out our API here at the API Stack Exchange, api.stackexchange.com, where you can see anything that you need. For instance, here's some endpoints. If you wanted to get all the questions that are on Stack Overflow, that you can just hit that API and you can get them. Hit that endpoint. Same thing if you wanted to just see all the answers. It's a lot of cool stuff that you can do, and we're open to having this information shared with everyone. So I do want to just point out a quick disclaimer. There is some throttling on the API. There are some access tokens you can do if you did want to. Make sure that you don't hit any throttling endpoints. I pursue that, but otherwise it's completely free to do. Actually, that's a great point. I'll drop the links in one moment. If you give me a second, I'll put them in the chat, or maybe even Rosendo can help out. But with that, I say good luck to you all. Enjoy it. Please take these tips to heart. Make sure that you're open to all the resources, all the things that you can learn. Don't be afraid of weird, and keep embracing what you do. It's a great time to be a part of it. And with that, I just any questions, thoughts, anything I could help with, please. Thank you. Is this the first time the endpoints are public? No, our API has been public for years and years, longer than I've been at Stack Overflow, which is a little over 3 years now.
Hey y'all, I just wanted to check out the stream and ensure that the audio was still going. It looks like Ben has frozen up a little bit, but please keep your questions coming. We will try to kind of like get through them as soon as Ben gets back on the stream. So yeah, Ben, just heads up. I am here holding time for you. We've got a question from IM45145V. How can I communicate better to get optimal resources? All right. Waiting for Ben to jump in here. I am making note of all of these questions. Here you go. We've got another question. Great question from I'm sorry, your name's pretty long here. But the question is, Ben, how does one not jump into too many technologies which appear to be interesting and rather stick with one technology for a certain time and build projects? Um, Excellent question. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and make a note of that. And another question from Shizu. Question is, endless resources to learn is a great thing, but it can be overwhelming. Any advice on that? I definitely want to know myself because sometimes it's really hard to get started because there are so many things for you to really just like kind of jump into. Awesome, man. Here comes Ben again. I think we're all set with regards to the latency. But yeah, Ben, I've gone ahead and queued up some questions for you that I think are pretty interesting. Here's the first one.
How can I communicate better to get optimal resources? That's a great question. And not to fall too back on what I was saying before, but it depends. It depends on what the resources are and what you're really trying to do. But I think a great place to start from for any sort of conversation like that you know, is the value proposition, what you're trying to do, and what you can solve with what you are going to be able to do with those resources. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made with some limited resources, but being able to say, like, if I have this, I can accomplish this and tie that back to larger goals. I think that's always a great place to start. All right. uh, so how does one not jump into too many technologies which appear to be interesting and rather stick with one technology for a certain time and build projects? ah um Um, I don't know so much about the how or maybe even the if. At least for me and some other people, jumping into a lot of them and finding one that really interests you, I think it is an okay way to go. If you have one that you really are interested in, you want to stick with, or maybe there's some job opportunities or something that your employer needs you to stick into. I can totally feel the frustration of, like, there's so many cool shiny toys out there. I don't want to limit myself to just one, right? And one of the ways is to just try to find what really gets you passionate about learning or in a certain language, and just try to focus on that. I can say for me, um kind of like the small little dopamine hits I would get when learning something new is when I was just able to see, like, things connect together. Like, so for me, a sample application I would write often was kind of around like some fantasy sports analysis. I like fantasy football, if you guys do as well, but I was able to kind of connect the dots on, like, breaking down or doing some analysis. Once I was able to do that with a new language, that was kind of my little dopamine hit of, like, okay, I can see what I can do with this language, and I'm digging into it more. So I'd say find out what that is for you. What's that kind of cool functionality you have in mind that you wish you could do in a new language? And maybe that's a great way to start with it. But I do want to underline, I would say don't try to limit yourself if you don't have to. Expose yourself to what is out there and you want to learn, and if something really resonates with you, stick with that. There's plenty of industry and plenty of work out there to be done in a whole bunch of different languages. I would say just find what really suits you. Endless resources to learn is a great thing, but it can be overwhelming. um, I'm with you on that. I know exactly what you mean. So I mean, sorting through all of the information that's out there is tough, whether it's learning a technology or anything else for that matter. Um, I would say just try to find what kind of got you into it, and go from there. I might be a little biased. I think Stack Overflow is a great community to learn from. Of if you have some questions, or you want to learn more about a technology, that's a great place to go. But also, it depends on how you want to learn. For me, I'm not a huge fan of video. I prefer to actually, go through text and have some blogs, grab some code samples. Other people love video, and actually see someone walk through it. Or even there's now Twitch live streams of people live coding side by side. And that's pretty cool. Um, So again, I would say like it depends on how you like to learn and how you like to absorb information. I would start with there and try to stick with that. But I totally sympathize with the challenge. There, the downside of there being this overwhelming amount of information is we have to sort through it all, which isn't always easy. Can I show you some sample AB? um, I'm happy to drop the links in of. I want to make sure uh, if it's okay, I could just drop something in chat. I mean, it's actually wide open. Actually, I don't think I have the ability to. Oh, thank you. Um, yeah, I'm actually going to send you a quick link as well. Rasun, if we could put that in the chat. I don't seem to have access to the chat, but I just dropped in a link, like if just an open API endpoint to get all the questions back from Stack Overflow. There it is in there. Um, and what this does, it'll just send you a JSON response of all the questions on Stack Overflow. Given that we're presenting, this might be the one time it doesn't work, um, but if you actually follow the api.stackexchange.com, they'll walk you through everything you need to do, all the options, all the endpoints, and all the ways that you can use the data. It's a really flexible, powerful tool that we've built because it's just really important to us that people can use all this information. I mean, trying to empower the community is something that we're really dedicated to. Without the community and folks like you asking and answering these questions, there really isn't a Stack Overflow. So that's really the power of what the community has. So we want to make sure people can use this information. Okay, just for fun, how often do you search Stack Overflow to solve problems you face during work? Or how often do you have issues and go, hey, I should fix this? Pretty often. Nowadays, I don't code so much in Stack Overflow. Probably a very good choice for them. They don't let me code so much. I help empower the developers on my team, but we use Stack Overflow just as much as anyone else. We are users and consumers of it first. I think a lot of people that come to Stack Overflow, like the real interest is because of all of how it's helped them. And they want to kind of give back to their community in the same way by helping the platform. So all of us are really users of Stack Overflow first and developers second. Excuse me. So Stack Overflow posted something about sponsoring tech meetups in schools which have an MLH presence. I don't know if I'm the best one to answer this.
I could jump on real quick to
Yeah.
talk about this, Ben. MLH and Stack Overflow are working together on a ton of different things, including Global Hack Week. They also worked with us at HackCon a couple of weeks ago. And moving forward into the fall semester, we're actually going to have something called the Pizza Fund, which is available for folks in the US and in Canada to actually sponsor small meetups, tech meetups, and within your campus or within your school or like just with the clubs that you have or are participate in, with regards to like technology or anything like that. Basically, we'll send you over like swag and pizza if you like host like a study session, a mini hackathon, or a workshop session with you and your peers. So definitely keep a lookout for that. We'll have more information, circulating throughout the community with regards to that. But for now, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Ben.
Thank you. How does one navigate through coworkers and other employees who are not very cooperative and just not want their feature to be executed? Kind of like Sarah from the Phoenix Project. Um, from the interpersonal point of view, that's the tough part of of what we have to work with other people. Sometimes part of that is negotiation of making sure that values are aligned. And I would kind of go back to what I was saying before around trying to get resources. Is start with what we're really trying to solve and the value we're trying to create. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Sometimes there are people who are very inflexible, and there's not much you can do about that of trying to change some minds that don't want to be changed. But given that this is a group thing and a collective effort of whatever you're trying to build, trying to get everyone on the same page, you're never going to get everyone, but if you get the group there, you're able to show like this is the value that we're trying to create. here's some ways that we can do it. And I think this is going to create more value for our team and our product. Try to make it a collective effort as opposed to a one-on-one thing when you can. Also, how do you do about managing time and schedule as a dev? This is a great question. And There's a lot of different approaches that people have. A lot of people advocate, and I agree that given that this is sort of like a deep and technical exercise of not only just a creative one, of needing time to focus and process a problem, devs need some uninterrupted time. Part of that is asking for it and just letting people know that you need it. I try to set for my teams. I let them know that if they have more than 2 hours of meetings in a day, something has gone wrong. So I want to make sure that they have their time to really focus and take some time on working on what they want to work on. It's totally okay to block off a couple hour long block in your calendar, letting everyone know that you're doing that, and just so you can sit down and focus. Now, if it's kind of managing time and scheduling between like your prioritization with projects, that's a whole other skill as well. That could be a whole other talk actually, just how you kind of prioritize the tasks at hand. But I would say just, and that varies from person to person, but I would say like making sure that you have the time that you need is something that, from a personal point of view, making sure that you provide, but also if you're in an organization, making sure that they provide you that time. That's a completely reasonable ask. What are some good practices that you would suggest people who are hoping to answer questions on Stack Overflow and help other people? Just tips to make our answers better, more readable, and helpful. That's a great question. You know, um, to kind of give a little background on where I'm coming from with that is, Stack Overflow is, um, like some people can sometimes have some frustrations coming to Stack and asking a question if they don't know how to ask a question well, or they're trying to really get their point across, but it's just not coming across well. And that can be sometimes for other people in the community to answer that question well. Um, so I would say, like, first and foremost, understand that there's a person on the other side of that question. Like, our community folks do a great job of trying to make our community as welcoming as possible. And I understand that some people have like some frustrations with not being able to ask their question well, but we have a great guide. So I would say that the first step of making your questions like better is just understanding that there's a person there. And then second, see what they're really trying to solve. Some people can be frustrated with, not understanding like the real crux of the question that they're asking, and people can be frustrated by not being able to answer it well. So one of the great skills to have is maybe sort of reading through what they're really trying to say and answering what they really need answered. There's a skill to that, comes with practice that you can use in a lot of different areas. So I would say, like, try to really understand what they're trying to solve. And always one thing I am a huge fan of, always try to include code in your answer and in your questions for that matter. By helping us understand that context and what you've already tried and what you want to do, that really helps people along. Like being able to copy and paste something and run it and see if that's really what they wanted. That's a huge satisfying thing for the question asker. So I'm a newbie into the development environment. Sometimes I feel like copying a code or snippet degrades my quality as a dev. How do I deal with that? Interesting. Um, I want to make just to make sure I understand your question. If you feel that like by just copying and pasting code, you're not you're not being a real dev or something like that, just to let you know, copying and pasting code is something that's going to be extremely common for people at all levels. Like not reinventing the wheel and finding something that already solves what you want to do is a big part of what we do as developers. But the asterisk around that is you need to understand the context of what you're using and how it applies to what you do. Like just copying and pasting code all day long is probably not going to solve the problems that you want to do, but it will be a part of what you do. But you need to understand the context of what you're copying and pasting. How can you alter it or tweak it to make sure that it's part of what you really want to build. I think it is a great exercise, perhaps to your point, of trying to maybe write things from scratch or seeing what someone else has done, writing it yourself and maybe in your own style. I think that's a great exercise to have to flex some muscles. But I do want to underline reusing some code that's open and available. That's a very common thing. I would even say a normal, healthy thing to make sure that you're not reinventing the wheel and kind of leaning on the rest of the development community to keep making all of us better. I'm a newbie as a front end developer, and I've always found it difficult to get internships. How can I do that? How to get an internship? Uh, this is might be a whole other talk unto itself too. But you know, what I mean, breaking in and getting an internship can be difficult, or getting into the industry overall as a junior can sometimes be difficult. What I will say is kind of leaning back into the example of there's so many resources out there. If there's also plenty of things to get involved in. I think getting involved in open source software projects is a great way to learn some things, to show that you've contributed to things, building your own projects, building your own sites. I would say just keep trying to get your work out there, keep trying to practice and keep getting better. I mean, there's plenty of open source projects that really give back to the community, provide a lot of value, and all of them need help here and there. Trying to find an opportunity to do that could be a great way to go. But also just keep going out there, keep getting your question out there, or keep getting your resume out there. And hopefully things click and you find the right place for you. What would be your suggestions to people asking questions on Stack Overflow? Tips for asking better questions in the community? Yeah, kind of aligned with that other question before. Asking a question well is a skill. And not even just for Stack Overflow, but in all that we do, making sure that you frame the question, what you're really trying to solve, and things like that. I would say start with what you really want to achieve, kind of list all the things you try, and make sure that you include some code, especially in a Stack Overflow question, because as well as we can explain things, the code really shows what we've been trying to do and kind of what is and is not working for us. And that way people can really respond and see what's going on. So yeah, I think some of the common mistakes, at least that I've seen personally, is people really not being clear on what they want to achieve, and then also not being clear on what they've already tried. You see plenty of times people ask a question of, I want to do XYZ, and people will give an answer or recommendation, and the response will be, oh, I've already tried that. And, and that can be frustrating for the person giving the answer. Like, well, I didn't know. I spent all this time trying to craft you a good answer. So those would be kind of the big tips. Thank you. Yes, great link there. All right. How to develop a product for a hackathon by any programming language. Explain it for a very, very new person in the software field. Knows programming, but do not know any code or project. I want to make sure I answer your question well, but so it sounds like you're very new to development, but you do want to contribute to the hackathon and build something, but you haven't really done any significant coding yet. Yeah, I can understand how that would be daunting and maybe a little bit difficult, but I would say also think of it as an opportunity. You don't have to knock it out of the park every time. None of us do our first couple of times out. I would say just try to set something in mind, set a goal in mind, and lean on all those resources to try to do it. And if you don't succeed within like the hackathon timeframe or anything, that's fine too, but try to do it incrementally. Just like find, like, I want to do this step one for this larger idea I have, see if I can knock that out. And then try to do like the next thing, then the next thing. See if you can like break down the whole project into bits. And even if you aren't able to complete it all because you're very new and this is a learning experience, doing those little bits and getting at least some learning out of it and some rewarding bits, hey, still call that a win. You don't have to win the hackathon your first day out, especially if you're new to the field. But I do appreciate and encourage you to give it a try. I mean, it's not always easy. Like I was saying before, it's intimidating to tackle programming early on. So I applaud you for trying it. Go out there. Good luck. Do we use heavy DSA, which are asset interviews in production applications? I'm not sure. DSA, what does that stand for? I'm guessing something service architecture. If you could mind clarifying, data structure and algorithm. Oh, I see. um, so if this is a kind of might be a valid critique of dev interviews that we have. Um, uh, I mean, kind of the industry. A lot of people like to ask questions that might not really apply to what we do day to day as a developer, and I get that. I mean, I'd say that answering dev interview questions is hard, and so is asking good ones. But it's especially hard for the interviewee who has to kind of think of things that may not apply to what they do day to day normally. So it's certainly a part of what we do, especially for some performance critical things of being able to understand the implications of an algorithm or what's the right data structure for that. Um, so, um, but do we use it in production application? I mean, we certainly do. I will say there might be a little bit of a disconnect in the amount of how much it's leaned on in the interview process versus how often it is used in the real world development. So that is something that I think the whole industry needs to get better on. We personally at Stack, we try to ask questions that are simplified versions of some difficult tasks that we've had to tackle to, like, have some real world clarification to what we try to do. Um, but yeah, so I would say it varies from place to place, but I mean, there's certainly parts of the Stack Overflow code which relies on these on some very intense, like I would say even creative might even be a better word, like data structures and ways to solve problems. But there is a little bit of growing for the industry and how we interview folks. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's what came to mind. How do they divide the task? I mean, I may be missing some context to that question. Um, if this is in reference to before, how do you break down a project and tasks within a hackathon idea? Um, as a group thing, yeah. If you're working with another group on how to tackle a project and like how do you break it down, I mean, yeah, there's a whole lot of moving parts in how you could do that. It really depends on what some people are passionate about and what some of their skill sets are. For instance, if you have a lot of front end folks, and there's going to be a front end part of your application, separating out kind of the tasks in that area becomes a lot easier, right? Because you all understand it and the idea. But maybe in some areas where you're not as thorough, like maybe something on the database or backend side, those might be opportunities for people to work on it together. So you can lean on each other and make sure it's done right. Um, so I don't think there's a one size fits all for this, but I think I would say one output that if you can, especially if you're building tests around it, maybe for a hackathon you won't, but in general, try to do these into single, like testable, kind of consumable pieces. Like you can know whether or not you've solved something, like whether you want to build a service that responds with all the users in your application. Like that's something that you can kind of test and like do a yes, no checkbox. I've done it. Trying to break them down into those sorts of tasks can really be helpful. Hackathon versus dev world development and companies. Um, Hackathon versus dev world. If you're trying to say like if there's differences between how we develop for a hackathon versus how we develop for kind of like in a more enterprise or professional setting, yeah, there are some big differences, and it's really just in what your goal is. For a hackathon, you have like a couple days, maybe at most a week of to get something out the door. In larger organizations, it's we are building something we have to maintain for years and years and years, and hopefully we can keep growing and expanding. So we think with that in mind. Like, so for a hackathon, doing something that like with those pros and cons I was talking about, like maybe a con you can take on very comfortably is maybe this isn't very flexible or extendable or testable, and that's okay for a hackathon. If we're talking into a larger organization setting, um, we are worried about not only what we can ship in, a couple of weeks, but we're worried about what we can ship in years and years. How testable is it? How scalable is it? How flexible is that code? These are like big parts of the mindset, and what you'll get in a lot of code reviews and code feedback will largely be around those things of how readable is it? If someone else came into it later, is this something that we're going to be able to maintain well? These are what are top of mind for a lot of the things that we build in companies. I know an idea for a hackathon problem, but confused on how to start. I know Python, but I don't know front-end development. I'm confused what to do with Python. Then I think there's a problem to show your work because our project only run on terminal. I see. So you're worried about the presentation layer of a hackathon project. I think that's a fair concern, because you really want to be able to communicate the value of what you built, right? You want to make sure that people can see what the work that went into it, and they're able to see it right off the bat. I would say that hackathons tend to be group projects. I would say try to pair with some folks that are able to do some front end stuff. Actually, I think someone even mentioned in the chat there that they would be offering to help, which is our awesome dev community at work right there. So thank you, York Victoria. So I think that's a great way to do it. Think of these as a team. Like I was saying, like a lot of the complexity in software development is not just what you can build; it's working with other people and seeing if you can leverage each other's skill sets, and hopefully you can take that as a learning experience. How do we know that we're ready to get out there? Oh, wow. I mean, respectfully, I don't even know if I was ready. So there's a lot of things at play there. One, just to get out of the way, for better or worse, some people don't like this term so much, but it's commonly referred to as imposter syndrome. But it's just this idea that regardless of how well we do or how ready we feel, we always feel like we're not quite good enough, or we're not quite up to the task at hand. I know that feeling can stop people from putting yourself out there, but I would say it's really up to you. If you're ready to take that leap and try it, go for it. I can tell you this: some of the things that we really look for in some of our junior developers that we would hire is really just around demonstrating an ability to learn and adapt. Kind of whatever that you've done before, when you come onto a new place or a new team, however big or small, you're going to have to make some adjustments, right? Excuse me. And kind of learn new things. If you feel like you're flexible enough to adapt to what other companies might throw at you, or how you might have to adjust, and this can be from learning new languages or trying on some other new projects, that'll be a great way to really know that you're ready to put yourself out there. So I would say, just it's going to change from person to person. But just try to think of, if you're ready to really adjust what you're doing and adapt to a new organization, I think that's a great sign that you're ready to kind of go out there and really try to work, and you're comfortable in your abilities.
Alrighty. Well, you know what? Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate all of the time you put into today's workshop and answering so many questions. I'm sure everyone here is so much better off for all of the wisdom that you've imparted. Honestly, great stuff here. Really appreciate all the answers you had. Anything else you wanted to say in closing?
Just thank you so much for the time, everyone. It was great talking with you. It's a great group in the comments here. A lot of great questions, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the week.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Ben. And for the folks that are, in the chat and you still have questions, feel free to drop into the Discord and ask someone at Global Hack Week, because that's why we're here. We're here to build community and we're here to answer each other's questions and help each other out. And maybe it's not Ben that helps you with the question that you have from this chat, but maybe it's someone else that is in the community and has like a very similar either background or perspective. And you never know where you'll be able to get help from. So always definitely feel free to ask. And that's, we try to keep it as inclusive as possible. That being said, thank you so much for joining us and have a great day, y'all.
Thanks, all.
Bye. I forgot to mention, definitely stick around because we have DigitalOcean coming up next. In 10 minutes, you'll be hearing from someone on the DevRel team there. And we're going to be talking about DigitalOcean cloud functions. So see you there. Later, y'all.